My name is Gail Weiss, and I'm the interim director of the WGSS program here at GW. And I'm just going to I'm also a professor of philosophy, and I regularly teach courses in the WGSS program, many of which are cross-listed with philosophy, including at the undergrad level, philosophy, race, and gender, and at the graduate level, feminist ethics, theory and policy implications, and queer philosophy and LGBTQ policy. So this, just for a quick outline of the presentation, I'm going to give you some details about our program, um, and then discuss career outcomes, the admissions process, and tuition costs and funding opportunities. So moving to my next slide, here's some pictures of members of the leadership of our program for this year. As I mentioned, I'm interim director of the program, while our director, Ashwini Tambe, is on sabbatical this year and is also a Fulbright scholar in India this year. Professor Aiko Strader is the director of graduate studies in the public policy track of our MA. We have two MA tracks, a liberal arts MA track, for which I'm also serving as Director of Graduate Studies this year, and the Public Policy MA track. So if you have specific questions related to either of those tracks, liberal arts should be directed to me, and public policy to Professor Strader. Professor Ivy Ken is our Director of Undergraduate Studies, and is also a professor of sociology. Just other core faculty, Ashwini Tambe, who I mentioned previously, our director who's on sabbatical this year, who will return to GW at the end of her sabbatical. Kavita Daya was our previous director of the program and is currently Associate Dean of Academic Innovation at GW. Jamita Barlow is our assistant professor in our program and in the writing program, and also does a lot of work with the Milken School of Health Sciences on health policy. Shweta Krishnan is in her second year with us, is visiting professor of WGSS and teaches many of our core courses. We're hoping to retain Shweta, Professor Krishnan, next year as well. Waiting to hear the outcome of that. Professor A.K. Wright joined us this fall. They are Assistant Professor of American Studies and WGSS. Also teaching some really interesting courses in our program on Black feminist thought and queer and trans health. Sarah Matheson has been away on sabbatical and a fellowship the last 2 years, and we're excited to have her return to us this fall. She does a lot of work on women's reproductive health, and she's an associate professor of history as well as WGSS. Okay, the history of our program. We're very proud of the fact that we established the first women's studies graduate degree program in the US. So that program has been running for now over 50 years. And we also had the first public policy women's studies MA degree, which began in the early 1980s. Still a very distinctive offering in our program. So we are known for our the interdisciplinary scholarship and coursework that our students take in the program. And so our courses do tend to bridge the humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. I would say especially the humanities and the social sciences in particular. And as is mentioned here in the bottom statement, our students analyze structures of power, particularly in relationship to gender, race, sexuality, ethnicity, and nationality. We also, our students have a passion for social justice and thinking of, different ways to challenge inequity and to pursue social justice goals, especially in the challenging climate we're facing today. So I would say one of the things that marks our program is very much an intersectional approach to the issues of the social and political issues that our students tend to address both, and that we tend to focus on in our own research. Why GW? Well, that we have several different options. I think one thing that's appealing about our program is that there are two different tracks. A regular MA in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, what we call the liberal arts MA, where you can specialize in a specific area, and it could be a disciplinary field like sociology or philosophy or economics. But anthropology, but it also can be an interdisciplinary specialization. For instance, LGBTQ studies could be your specialization within the liberal arts track. So we do offer that option of choosing your own area of specialization, either disciplinary or interdisciplinary, and you work on that. You develop that. If it's interdisciplinary, that will be something that you will work on in conjunction with the director of graduate studies for the liberal arts concentration. For me, that in this case, for this year, it's me as interim director. So the MA in public policy is uh, is administered officially, and the degrees conferred through our Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration. But your degree is a degree in public policy with a concentration in women's gender and sexuality studies. We have a third graduate program, which is a graduate certificate in WGSS. That certificate program is primarily designed for students who are already in a graduate program at GW. It is possible to apply for just the graduate certificate without being a GW student, a graduate student, but most of the people who complete the certificate are already either in a graduate program or possibly employed at GW and would like to get the graduate certificate on the way to the program. I will talk about the specific requirements on each of those for each of those degrees in momentarily, but I just want to also flag that we have a dual degree program with the GW Law School, either a JD and WGSS MA or an LLM and WGS MA. Here, I think the key point, and this will be mentioned also later, is to do the joint law WGSS degree, you need to be separately accepted to the law school at GW. And then usually the way it happens is people are in the law school, or just enrolled in the law school, and then apply to do the WGSS MA as well. So usually that's the best way to go to apply. You have to already be accepted to the law school in order to apply for that program. So as you can see with these various offerings, there's a lot of flexibility there. I think one of the strengths of our program is that students can, each student designs their own individualized curriculum. There are enough electives with each of the different MA requirements, as well as the grad certificate and dual degree requirements, to allow students quite a bit of flexibility in charting their own curricular plan for their time here at GW in the WGSS program. So you get the advantage of both interdisciplinary and disciplinary training. We are, as I mentioned earlier, particularly strong in intersectional approaches, transnational feminisms, and public policy. And as Nicola mentioned at the outset, our location is really ideal for internships and employment. Most of our students do have jobs, and so we tend to offer, most of our courses are offered in the evening time. So for students who are working part-time or full-time, that has worked well for them so that you can have a job and work on your master's along the way. So you can also be a part-time student or a full-time student, and that's something you can check on your application. And yes, I've already mentioned the evening courses offered. I think GW really has, for those of you who aren't from the area, the best location in DC of all the area universities in our Washington, DC consortium. We're just about 4 blocks from the White House. The State Department's right down the street. We're a block from the Foggy Bottom Metro, which is which is on campus. Very few of the other universities have a metro on campus. We do. We're about 10, 15-minute walk to downtown Georgetown. And the Metro line at Foggy Bottom, our stop, has three different, the blue, the orange, and the silver line. So we're really in an ideal location in the District of Columbia. Okay, so more advantages of the program, the joint degree with the law school, already mentioned. Also, this is a key point for those of you who might be interested in public policy. The public policy WGSS MA does count toward the PhD in public policy and public administration at GW. So for a student who wants to continue at GW from the MA to the PhD, if you were in the public policy track in the MA program, you can count credits that you've taken in your WGSS program towards your PhD, thereby reducing the amount of coursework you would need in that PhD program. Next, we do have a lot of career opportunities in policy or advocacy-oriented nonprofit organizations and public agencies. And so I think this is something that is especially appealing to a lot of our applicants. We also have several of our students in the past and even currently want to continue on to PhD programs. And there's quite a few, our program, I think, prepares people well, our students well, whether they want to go on and do a WGSS PhD, which some students do. Since we don't offer the PhD, you're well positioned if you have a WGSS MA from GW to be a strong candidate for a PhD program in WGSS, but we've also had students go on to law school, other humanities and social sciences PhD programs. Okay, the MA degree, some of the core requirements. This is for the liberal arts MA degree. Okay, so not the public policy. I'll be talking about that one next. So there are the core requirements for this degree. There are 4 core requirements. The Fundamentals of Feminist Theory course, which again, most people, as mentioned here in parenthetically, most people take in the fall of the first year. So that's a really excellent course to get to know your first year cohort because everyone is usually in that class together. Research issues in WGSS is people take the fall of their second year. The capstone research seminar is the spring of the second year. And then there's a choice between a practicum or thesis. Most students tend to do the practicum choice, and usually the spring of their second year. Usually the students take the capstone and the practicum in the spring of their second year. Again, the fundamentals course in the fall of the first year and research issues in the fall of the second year. And that leaves, since 3 courses is a full-time load per semester at GW, that leaves plenty of room to fit in your electives. For graduate certificate students, they take the fundamentals course, they take the research issues course, and then 2 electives of their choosing in consultation with the director of the program. So this is still the MA in liberal arts. There's additional coursework requirements aside from those 4 core courses, which I just discussed. There's an additional theory course that's required, and that you have a choice between 2 different courses, contemporary feminist theory or global feminisms. It's also possible to take both and have one be one of your electives. And some students want to take both. So those courses tend to be offered in the spring each year. So there's also 4 courses related to your disciplinary or topical concentration. So once you've settled on what your concentration is within the liberal arts MA, you will take 4 courses specifically related to that. If it's disciplinary, there'll be 4 courses in your specific discipline. If it's topical, your concentration, some examples are provided here for those courses in LGBTQ plus issues in sexuality would be a good example if your concentration is LGBTQ plus, but also gender and health, gender and race, global feminisms, gender and international development. All of these are possible courses that you could take. We also have many, many cross-listed courses with our affiliated faculty and other departments. So there's plenty of offerings each year. One good place to look is the GWU schedule of classes under WGSS. It's pretty easy to access even just through Google, so you can take a look at what courses we have offered this year, for instance, in this past fall and this past spring, to get a good sense of what some of the different options are. Then you have, outside of the required courses for the liberal arts core and the 4 courses related to your disciplinary or topical concentration, you can take 3 other electives. And so they don't have to be in your area of specialization. And this offers, again, more freedom for each student to kind of chart their own course in the program. So maybe there's a specific area that you really want to take. It's not in your concentration, but this gives you the option to take other courses in related areas that are of interest. So moving on to the MA in Public Policy with a concentration in WGSS. There's, aside from, actually, when I was speaking earlier, and I might just go back to it, the MA degree core requirements back here, the fundamentals of feminist theory, the research issues, the capstone, and the practicum or thesis are for both degrees. And I should have said that. I was saying it was for the liberal arts, but these are the same core requirements. So that's also why our first and second year cohorts tend to be very close, because whether you're pursuing the liberal arts MA track or the public policy track, you do take these same 4 courses together as a cohort. So moving on now back to the public policy with a concentration in WGSS, the additional coursework requirements for this track is to take 4 policy courses in the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration, which we refer to as TSPPPA. So the 4 courses, additional coursework for this track, are a gender and public policy course, usually taught by our Director of Graduate Studies in Public Policy, Professor Aiko Strader. There's a policy analysis course. PPPA is the abbreviation for the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration in the schedule of classes and registration forms. So a policy analysis course, economics for public decision-making course, and a research methods and applied statistics course. And especially these latter 2 courses are geared to making sure students acquire the quantitative, if they don't already have them, the quantitative research skills that they need to do both policy analysis and to also conduct their own policy research in the program. So then also you have electives that you can take in the program. In addition, 9 credits, which is, our courses tend to be 3 credits in the program each. So this is 3 additional courses. So you've got the 4 core WGSS MA courses that I mentioned previously. Then you've got the 4 courses in the public policy required core courses, and then 3 additional electives in this public policy track. The graduate certificate program, some people have, you can complete it in 1 year. Then you would be taking 2 courses per semester, since it's 4 course requirement. And this is, again, primarily designed for graduate students in other GW programs who would like a WGSS credential. But we have also had some GW employees do the certificate program as well. So for those students, they do take the fundamentals course, the research issues class, and then choose the other 2 classes from other departments in consultation with their advisor. Okay, the joint law degree, I mentioned already. One thing about it is it usually takes 4 years to complete the joint degree instead of the 5 years that would normally be required to pursue the degree separately. 3 years of law school, 2 years MA. So the advantage of the joint program is you get both degrees in 1 less year than you would if you pursued them separately. Yeah, if you're in the LLM program, you could also do an LLM combined MA program in public policy. Yes, as already previously mentioned, to qualify, you have to already be accepted in both programs, but especially the law school program first. Okay, career outcomes. Our MA in WGSS liberal arts students have gone on to work as HR specialists for the Department of State, a senior editor and writer at the American Association for University Women, legislative director, for Church Women United, a legislative assistant, Catholics for Free Choice, an attorney for the Public Interest Law Group, program officer, DC Trust. As you can see here, there's a few people who've been doing, who obviously went on to law school of our alums who have jobs related to law, program and outreach manager for the DC Volunteer Lawyers Project, development associate for the National Women's Law Center, director of operations for DC Safe, principal for Solutions for Change, and a development associate, assistant dean of faculty at the New School, as well as a senior research consultant for the National Partnership for Women and Families. So you can see there's a diverse list of different kinds of positions that students have gotten. And mainly, I think these are also often tied to what their areas of concentration were within the liberal arts master's track. Moving on to the MA in Public Policy, WGSS concentration. I just will mention that these slides will all be available to you afterwards. You can go back and look at them more carefully. I know I'm going through them a bit quickly here. But there's a lot to get through, and I want to make sure I give you as much information as possible, but also leave you all time to ask questions at the end. So research associate for the Urban Institute, Associate Director of Art, Editorial, and Media for the American Association of University Women. We've had quite a few alums working for the American Association of University Women from both tracks of the MA, including a political media coordinator. We also have a vice alum who's a vice president for programs and policy and women work, the National Network for Women's Employment, a director of financial security and mobility for the Pew Charitable Trust, a legislative director for federally employed women, a senior public affairs associate for Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, and a program officer for the Washington Area Women's Foundation. So these are just a few examples. As you can see, many of these, not all, are based in Washington, and quite a few of our students choose to stay on in Washington after graduation, and that has led to our having a very strong alumni base, local alumni base in the area, which has been really great for us. And we often try to have alumni events and have some of our alumni who have graduated from the program speak at different events to our current grad students about their careers and how the WGSS program has helped them in their career. So that's something we commonly try to do each year. So the admissions process, you are not required to take the GRE. And I think most people now, if they don't have to take it, tend not to. But if you've taken it and you did well on it, feel free to include your scores. We will look at them if they're included. But if you've taken it and you're not happy with your scores or you haven't taken it, you do not have to take the GRE to apply to our program. Statement of purpose essay is very important. It's required for both MAs and for the certificate program. And for the MA in public policy, particularly, I really do want to stress that your statement of purpose should show your readiness for taking quantitatively oriented courses, since that's a key part of the core and of that track in the program as a whole. And that is something that explicitly we're looking for when we're reading your statement of purpose for the MA in public policy. It doesn't mean you necessarily have done a lot of quantitative work already, although that's certainly advantageous if you have, but demonstrating a readiness to do that kind of work, an ability to do that kind of work is important. Writing sample 10 to 15 pages. Please don't submit one that's longer than that. That's also very important for both tracks of the MA to submit a writing sample. It can be a paper that you wrote during your undergraduate career, or something that you've written more, a policy brief, something you've done more recently if you graduated a few years ago. It does not have to be a paper written for an academic course, although many are. Official transcript is required for the MA and both tracks and the certificate program. And then for the MA, 2 are required, 2 recommendations, and 3 preferred if you're applying for funding. If you're applying for the graduate certificate program, 1 rec is sufficient. Tuition costs and funding opportunities, always very important to discuss for any prospective applicant. If you applied by February 1st, you would be considered for some of our competitive partial tuition awards. And the most common are a Dean's Award. And for some of our international applicants, depending on what country you're from, that you may be eligible for what's called the Global Leaders Award that is specifically designated for international students from specific countries. And you can get a list of those countries if you Google GWU Global Leaders Award. You can look for that list and see if you are an international applicant, if your country's on it. Also, work opportunities on campus. This is a big option for a lot of our students, a popular option, I should say, is that there is a couple different work opportunities. In addition to serving as a graduate instructional assistant, a GIA, we call them, TAs is what they're often called in other places, in WGSS or other departments. It's also possible to get other part or full-time jobs on campus. Now, if you're an international student, you're restricted in how many in your employment while you're in the States, but you can serve as a GIA. So you can be an instructional assistant. And that is a salaried position per semester. And we have a few GIAs in for WGSS courses, but our students have also served as GIAs in other departments. Sociology is an especially popular one because they hire a lot of GIAs and don't have enough grad students of their own to fill the slots. So many of our students have served as GIAs in sociology, but also in other departments as well. We have a student this semester, a first-year student, who's serving as a GIA for a sustainability course on campus. And their undergraduate background was in environmental science. And so the sustainability GIA was a perfect fit for them. So I think we've also had GIAs in American Studies and some other fields as well. So that is one opportunity that students, as a really popular one, because it's something that you also get to often know, work with other graduate instructional assistants. There's training that all graduate instructional assistants go through at GW prior to taking on that role. But also, we have students who've obtained full-time administrative positions on campus, and those do include very generous tuition benefits. So for those students, the funding they can get, the tuition remission they get for being a full-time staff member is much higher than the amount of aid we're able to provide to our master's students. So that is something you can look at. If you're accepted into the program, you can look at the GW job listing. And I know one of our first-year students this year was able to obtain a full-time position this summer, doing administrative work for the communications program. And if you get that, if you get a full-time position at GW, you're eligible for tuition benefits for the very next semester after which you started your job. So this particular first-year student started his job in early August, and so he was able to use his tuition benefits immediately for the fall semester as well as the spring semester. And those do cover quite a bit of the tuition. So they're really popular options. And I think a lot of departments, I would say as well, really like having grad students as doing administrative work for them, and there's a really good network, I think, of grad students across the university who are working at GW. So yeah, so you may not, for international students, I think there are limits, as I mentioned earlier, due to visa restrictions for outside employment in DC, but the GIA positions are an option. There are also some fellowships through the Office of Graduate Assistance and Fellowships, and there's a hyperlink here where you can look up what other fellowships might be available. We also offer conference travel support for students presenting a paper, and we really encourage our students to try to present at conferences as much as they can while they're with us. And so, in fact, just last week we did a panel during the capstone seminar for on presentations and publications, a publishing and presentation workshop. Okay, so WGSS events. This is something that we run a lot of events on campus, at least 10 per year. We do a welcome back, student and faculty mixer every year, right at the beginning of the semester. It's a great way to start meeting people in your cohort. We also tie that in with a first year student orientation. So an opportunity right at the beginning. Usually we do it right before the semester starts or the week before the first week of classes. And we have that orientation and mixer. We also, because we have such strong cohorts, the second year cohort often has organized something for the first year students who've just come. They took them out for like a happy hour after the student faculty mixer this fall. And I think the current first year class is planning to do that for the class coming in next year. We also have student-led discussions. We've had quite a few these last couple of years, and we'll be having more this spring, and I'll talk about them. I have some flyers to show you about those discussions and the topics that they have that are coming up in this presentation. We, as I mentioned earlier, often have events featuring our alumni. We have faculty research presentations. We'll be having one of those this spring. We have our annual ULI symposium every spring. That's our annual lecture that we're also going to be having this spring, and I have a flyer to show you on that. So, and then lastly, we have a WGSS Graduate Student Symposium, and that was usually tied to the work that the students, second year students, have done in the capstone class, and that will be taking place also later this spring. So here you have a couple photos of two student-led discussions, one on the bottom on abolition, revolution, and Afrofeminism in practice, which was organized by one of our undergrad students, WGSS majors. We had one on a candid conversation on the election that the picture on the top shows you, led by another one of our students who we're hoping will do a post-election event, since that was before the election later this spring. We also had, we get contacted a lot by people in the area who are scholars doing work related to WGSS, and we often feature them to give a talk. And in this case, the bottom photo is from one of those events, Fighting for Change in Iran, which was a talk by Dr. Fariba Parsa, who has done a lot of research on the women life freedom movement in Iran, and gave a fascinating talk on that topic this fall. Here's just some examples of the kinds of, this is on the left, the publishing and presentation workshop. Last year it was the publishing workshop. This is actually one from the previous year that had 4 different speakers. The ULI symposium also, this is from last spring's ULI symposium where Risha Nagar spoke. We have these are also just, most of these are from last year's events, and I'll have some flyers from this year's events too. So there was an event on court mediation of domestic violence in the Ghanaian context by a Fulbright scholar in residence from Howard University. So another example of a local researcher and scholar who was here, who we were able to take advantage of their presence to have them come and give a talk to our program. Our alumna Susan Markham has also spoken to our department, our program, more than once in terms of the work that she's done as the director of the Peace with Women Fellowship Program. We have the Writing Black Girls in Women's Health Science event that was last spring with Professor Barlow, who's been on sabbatical this year, and we're very excited to welcome back this fall. So Professor Barlow put this panel together for us. We also had a wonderful presentation on ecocide, gender, and the structural violence of extractive industries that was organized last spring as well by a Jamaican activist and filmmaker. And let's see, these are all mostly from last year, and I'm going to be moving into some of this year's activities. So you just get a sense of how many different kinds of activities we schedule. This was by our own Director of Undergraduate Studies, Professor Ivy Ken, gave a talk about her current research. And then we also had a Careers Advancing Gender Equity panel with people who mostly were working in the DC area and talked about, and I think this was a very popular event to talk about career options in terms of advancing gender equity. Okay, so this is just an example because I talked earlier about the Graduate Research Symposium. This is an opportunity for the second year capstone students before they graduate to give presentations on the research that they've been doing in that course. So this just gives you an example and gives you some of the titles. I'm not going to read through them all in the interest of time, and I'm going a little over, so I'm going to just move a little faster here because you'll have access to this later, but you can see there were 4 different panels from that cohort last year, all presenting their work to one another and to a larger audience. So there was also Ashwini Tambi did some research in the summer with 2 of our grad students, Emrup and Andrew Tassell, and then they gave a presentation on the research that they were doing. Here's just the election student-led discussion you saw a photo of earlier, was a flyer for that. These are all from this year. The Art and Ethics of Disability Culture. We had leading disability studies scholar, bioethics scholar Rosemary Garland Thompson gave a wonderful talk. The Fighting for Change in Iran, you saw the picture earlier. We had an amazing presentation on Ukrainian feminisms, very timely, Resistance and Psychologies of National Decolonization by a new faculty member at GW, Oksana Yakushko, who's Ukrainian, a Ukrainian feminist who's running the director of the professional development program at GW. These are events now that are going to be happening. One of them on the left this spring, Seeing, Sensing, Feeling, representing PUDA Life. The author, Juana Maria Rodriguez, is coming, and it's a talk that will be co-sponsored with English and WGSS. We had a student-led discussion last month that was terrific on international feminist solidarity by one of our first-year students, Yaprak Iris, who is from Turkey, and then the Yuli lecture is taking place later this month. Professor Lisa Gunther and Professor Eorn Ellis will be giving that. Both do work in abolition studies and indigenous studies. It should be a terrific talk. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a student-led discussion coming up on ecofeminism and social justice by another of our first-year students, the one who's doing this sustainability GIA, Leah Bogan. Okay, I think I got to the end here. So if you have questions related to the application, there's some contacts here. You can also follow us on social media. And now I am happy to turn to any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.